Hello and welcome again to the Writer Review. This is Eric Carrot Writer, and this week we're going to be taking a look back at the 2000 sci-fi psychological horror crime thriller. That's quite a mouthful, isn't it? Called The Cell. Yes, it's one of those movies where the director just couldn't decide what genre he wanted this movie to be, so he just decided to throw everything into one big blender, which turned into one big blunder. We'll get more into that later on. Okay, the director was Tarsim Singh, who was making his movie directorial debut in previous years. He had directed several music videos. I think he directed the REM video. I think it was Losing My Religion. He directed. Anyhow, yeah, Tarsim Singh is the director in this movie. It is produced by Julio Caro and Eric McLeod. The script was written by Mark Protasevich. The score was done by Howard Shore. The cinematography by Paul Laufer. And it was edited by Robert Duffy and Paul Rubel. And the stars of the movie are Jennifer Lopez, Vincent D'Onofrio, Vince Vaughn, Jake Thomas, Dylan Baker, Marianne Jean-Baptiste, Tara Subkoff, Catherine Sutherland, Musetta Vander, and Patrick Bauchau. You know, we can pretty much see where this is going. I may have said this many times before, and I might just be saying the same things with different wordings, but I can tell that whenever a movie treats us to the world of visual candy, chances are that's all we're going to get from it. One of those all style but no substance, and you could see that in the movie The Cell. The visuals might be among some of the best in the film industry, but then after that, what is there to offer? Very little, I suppose. There's very little plot. There's really no character development, and the script is just plain contrived, cliche, and lazy as fuck. Now, in the silent age of movies, The Cell probably would have been ahead of its time. But in this day and age, a plot and a decent story is mandatory. Otherwise, this movie is nothing more than just a fucking glorified picture show you could see in a museum or at some art display. It's just directionless. There's no point to it, and there's really very little or nothing to say about this movie. It tries to be too many genres, but very little results come out of it. So the plot of the movie is kind of similar to like if The Matrix and Silence of the Lambs had a baby. Except that The Cell is very inferior to The Matrix and Silence of the Lambs. The thin plot focuses on a brilliant young therapist named Dr. Catherine Dean, played by Jennifer Lopez, who has found a way of not only just getting into the minds of her patients, but actually she and her top-notch group of scientists and engineers have come up with a solution where you don't just figuratively get into the minds of your patients, but you actually can literally get inside the minds of your patients. Yes, they can actually physically enter into the minds of comatose patients or patients in general to see what is malfunctioning inside, to see where things are going wrong and how it could be repaired so that her patients can live a somewhat normal life. She has the backup from these top-notch specialists who, in cliche fashion, speak in this highfalutin, high-techno mambo-jumbo, where, unless you have a degree in quantum mechanics, you're probably going to either sit back and laugh at just how pseudo-intellectual they really sound, or maybe you may just need to grab a manual to sort of get a better understanding of what they're trying to say. Anyhow, she's got these specialists, and they're made to look and act important, and they have this apparatus that's complete with computer panels and these wires that kind of look like Twizzler sticks, so you don't know whether you should stick them into an electric outlet or to just simply bite into their yummy sweet goodness. And even the costume that Dr. Dean wears is, very, very similar to the red kind of like almost leathery type of apparatus or costume that Lad the Impaler wore in Bram Stoker's Dracula. But then again, for all you trivia buffs out there, the costume designer for the cell was actually the same person who did the costumes for Bram Stoker's Dracula. That kind of explains why Dr. Dean's bodysuit looks very similar to the bodysuit that Gary Oldman wore when he was Lad the Impaler in the 1992 Bram Stoker's Dracula movie. Little trivia there. Yeah, so this is getting, pretty cheesy as it is already. Oh, but it gets worse. In the opening scenes, Dr. Dean has used her new device to enter the mind of a comatose young boy and had successfully helped him break free from it. But things start to get a lot more darker and creepier from these as her new case progresses. Her latest subject comes in the form of a sick, twisted, psycho serial killer named Carl Starger, played by Vincent D'Onofrio, who has gotten a bit sloppy with his latest victim and is on the brink of becoming arrested. But it might be too late because he is now in a coma and maybe near death. And so will his latest victim, whose location is unknown, and only he knows where she is. So Dr. Dean must enter his mind to trace where the body is located, or where the victim is located, and to find images in his inner mind, to put it vaguely, are not very pleasant. I bet you're probably wondering why I refer to Carl Starger as a twisted psycho killer. Well, you just had to have me say, okay, Starger's method of torturing his victims is original and unorthodox, but it's still vile, grotesque, and disgusting, and the images could be very, very disturbing. So what he does is he targets young women, puts them in a cell, which comes with a glass enclosure that slowly gets filled with water encased with an automatic timer. He also uses a hoist in his basement as a means to suspend himself above their bodies while he records them as they die. He also seems like he's got a fetish for watching women suffer as they're dying from drowning in this cell. So while he's recording them as they're dying and suffering, he's practically jerking off while this is happening. He also seems to have a bit of a fetish for self-mutilation by piercing himself. I mean, if you look at his body, it's all covered with body piercings. I mean, it's grotesque. It's nothing at all attractive. He actually takes his victims to some isolated barns somewhere in the middle of nowhere, where nobody knows where his hideout is. And of course, obviously, he's not going to tell, because number one, he's in a comatose state, and number two, he's simply just not all there himself. Now the question we want to know is, why is Dr. Dean being assigned to go into the mind of this serial killer? Because this could be the chance where the victim can escape. But in order for the victim to escape, we have to know where she's hiding. That way, so the police could come into the cell and rescue her before it's too late. And the only way to do that is to get into the mind of the serial killer to know the whereabouts of where his victim is laying. But of course, inside the mind, I mean, he's in his adult form, he can manifest into many different characters in many different, almost like cosplay costumes. While at the same time, we can sometimes see visuals of his inner child, which is a scared, afraid little boy who seems to have had a traumatic childhood, which is kind of cliche, being, once again, we have another serial killer who was raised in an unpleasant upbringing from physical and domestic abuse from his parents. Well, I don't know if it's parents or parent, because it seemed like his mother was a no-show. I don't know whether if they were divorced or if she's dead. But anyhow, his relationship with his father was, to be put in blunt terms, not very compromising. You see, he's abused him in his younger days, which is the reason why he has become this sick, twisted individual, because underneath all that sick, twisted demeanor that he has, he's actually vulnerable and scared. So while she's trying to track down where the latest victim is, obviously the older version of Carl just wants to play dangerous mind games with her. The little boy, who she could probably potentially get answers from, could probably help save his latest victim's life. And they must do it, and they must do it fast before it's too late. So this movie is pretty gruesome. I mean, I'm not going to say 100% that this movie was bad, which it was bad. But I'll say that I'll give credit that as a guilty pleasure, it was entertaining. But just because it's entertaining doesn't necessarily mean it was that good. So Starger's method of torturing his victims: he targets young women, puts them in a cell with a glass enclosure that slowly gets filled with water encased with an automatic timer. He also uses a hoist in his basement as a means to suspend himself above their bodies while he records them as they die. And, like I said, what a gentleman he is, if you can hear the sarcastic tone in my voice. So through all that macabre ritual, there's really never any backstory as why he chooses to kill his victims this way. Oh, and I also forget to mention that it gets even worse. He doesn't just... So then you actually ask yourself, what does he do with the victims? Well, this is where it gets even more bizarre, more creepy, and more incoherent. You see, he doesn't just, use the common sense and just bury his deceased victims so they could get fed to the worms. No. What he decides to do in his own sick pleasures is he'll take the dead bodies, he'll plaster them up, he'll dress them up almost like mannequins, he'll hang them in a room somewhere and use them almost like figurines or mannequins to create some kind of sick, twisted, diabolical art collage, which is, artistic but not pleasurable. Oh yes, Vincent D'Onofrio really throws himself into this movie, and that is an understatement. He is one sick, twisted, demented motherfucker. Yeah, all I know is that we're treated to a lot of demented sexual pleasures and a myriad of flesh. This movie is definitely not for the faint of heart. It's never too late to turn back. So while Dean has to dig deep to find this shower cell where his latest victim is held hostage, and from there the picture show begins and pretty much the plot ends. Sure, this interdimensional theme park attraction may be creative from an artistic standpoint, but from a cinematic standpoint, that's a whole new ballpark. This approach is very archaic and quite obsolete in the style of filmmaking. Former MTV director Tarsem Singh seems to have two methods of directing. The first being all that wasteful plot devices out of the way, and the second going on the haunted house amusement park to look at creepy, macabre images that feel like an overextended music video rather than a movie. I mean, this is Singh's way of trying to tell him you have to get out of music video mode to create a movie, not just depend on imagery alone. And while the plot itself is formulaic and routine, the haunted house theme park wears out its welcome quite rapidly. If the plot would have included something of entertainment or originality, maybe this movie could have been a whole lot better. Due to the failed narrative and the lack of a compelling story, the cell is just a room full of party decorations, but really no actual party. I mean, the visuals and the images are just the decorations. But for the party part of a actual party is, You have to include the music. You have to include the food, the guests, the games. Like I said, all it is just one big decorated hall of scary, freaky images and Vincent D'Onofrio going cosplaying and playing dangerous mind games with Catherine Dean as she struggles to go into a battle between her life and and trying to kind of avoid, like risking her life for this sick, twisted bastard. But then again, where's the story? All the visuals and all the images is just not going to do justice. I mean, everything is just visual delight, but really there's nothing more to it. Performance-wise, Jennifer Lopez, well, she might be easy on the eyes, but her acting was atrocious. And I always felt that she was always somewhat overrated as a performer. Not because of the fact that she seems to have often thrown herself into these cliche roles as playing either a wedding planner or a housemaid. I mean, okay, in this movie she's playing a technological therapist who's trying to get into the minds of her patients. I mean, literally actually traveling into the minds of her patients to search for answers. So she's kind of breaking the professional job cliche that she's most famous for. But still, I still find her, and I think I'll always find her to be overrated as an actress. She was cast in the lead, obviously, for her looks, because nobody wants a middle-aged, old, frumpy therapist. No, for therapists in movies to work, they have to kind of be light on the eyes. Anyways, that's the reason why she was cast in this movie, and nothing more. Vince Vaughn, he is just badly miscast as the FBI agent Peter Novak as he tries to play outside his roles of comedy. Let's just face it, Vince Vaughn. Why spoil a good thing? You're a great comical actor. Just stay in comedies. Don't need to try to attempt to break out just because you want to go against typecast. If something works, stick to it. It's not that hard. And I think he's just trying to play his role way too seriously for a movie that shouldn't even be taken seriously. Vincent D'Onofrio, who I usually like, might probably have the more better performances compared to Jennifer Lopez and Vince Vaughn. I mean, on the track of calling Jennifer Lopez overrated, I've always found Vincent D'Onofrio on the other side of the table an underrated actor. Sure, I know he's done many other great movies, including, Full Metal Jacket as, Gomer Pyle, and, of course, Law and Order, Criminal Intent as Detective Robert Gorin. But, I will say he was probably the only actor of the three that I actually found the most entertained, and he actually did turn in a much more better performance of the two. But his role was just made to look scary, and his dialogue is underused, as he's basically rendered to just whining and screaming and cosplaying. Like, basically that's what he's doing. He's just cosplaying. I mean, he goes into these many different costumes, many different manifestations, many different identities, just to add more to this sick, twisted serial killer stereotype, which eventually has worn out its welcome after the first 30 minutes. I just found him to be quite over the top. Sure, I found him entertaining, but that could be just a guilty pleasure rather than a hand of applause. But however, the biggest letdown of The Cell definitely lays blame mostly to screenwriter Mark Protosevich for writing a lazy script, and that the weight of this movie was mostly on the shoulders of Tarsem Singh. I mean, here's the thing. If you don't have a good scriptwriter, you can't really have a good movie. I mean, the director just cannot just be judged for his directing himself or herself. In this case, it's a him. But if the script is bad, then the movie is bad. Singh went on to direct REM's Losing My Religion, and this was actually far more fun to watch and had an aura of amusement that you won't find in The Cell. And yet, Losing My Religion is a song that's about like 3-4 minutes long. And I actually found more entertainment in that than the almost near 2 hours of The Cell. At least in the REM video, Singh didn't need to depend on dialogue to get his movie across. Maybe he should just stick with music video directing. I'm not saying it's any more easier, it's probably more complex to work on a 4-minute music video than it is to work on a 2-hour movie. But like I said, if this is your forte, why try to go on to newer stuff if you just don't have the effort? And maybe I'm being a little hard on Tarsem Singh. Maybe if he would have found a better writer, a better person who would have a better understanding of the script, like I said, maybe this movie would have been a lot better. I mean, the script is the main culprit as to why this movie was a red herring. If you only wanted to watch this movie for the visuals, then I am the last person stopping you from seeing it. I give credits that the visuals were very impressive. It was colorful, but it was colorless in terms of the more other important factors that make movies great. I just feel that if I'm being fed meat and potatoes for supper, then just feed me the main course. Don't just give me the gravy. And The Cell is just that, with the visuals being the gravy and the plot and the story that's supposed to be the meat and potatoes just isn't there. I'm not trying to be a snob and say that I'm against these kind of genres of movies like psychological thrillers. I love psychological thrillers, especially those from the likes of the master himself, Alfred Hitchcock. I don't mind a good horror film. Some of them are actually quite enjoyable if given the proper direction and the right script. Crime drama. I mean, there's very little in terms of the crime drama, since most of the movie is just Jennifer Lopez going into Carl Starger's mind, which is nothing more than just a cosplay amusement park haunted castle bullshit. This is what this movie was. It was directionless. It didn't know what it wanted to be. If it would have stuck to one genre, maybe I would have brought up a much more positive take on this movie. But for all that, if I was to give this a scale out of 10, I'm sad. I'm sorry to say this, but as much as I'm sad to say this, and I'm sorry I have to say this, but I would have to give The Cell a 5 out of 10. So if you're here to see it for the visuals, go right ahead, but just don't get any kind of high expectations out of this movie. So I guess this ends my writer review. Thank you all for listening in. If you wish to subscribe to my YouTube channel, please feel free to do so. If you wish to leave a comment, go right ahead. But just remember the 3 simple rules. Be kind, be courteous, and please refrain from writing any rude comments. And I will be back again with another movie review. So until next time, this is Eric Karat Writer saying, keep watching those movies, and I'll see you around. Goodbye.